Andor Episode 6 has dropped and we've got a lot of things to break down, so let's get straight into it. We begin the episode with Cassian and Nemik having a conversation before the mission, and it's mostly related to how Nemik is feeling before the mission, that being nervous and all, telling Cassian he can't sleep. Cassian reassures him that the adrenaline of the moment will kick in and all will be fine, also telling him that
you'll sleep when it's done.
And boy was he right. We cut to the commandant conversing with the engineer that arrived from Coruscant, a Colonel Patagar. The two of them discuss about the Aldanis, and the conversation is really reminiscent of colonial dialogue in which the colonialists converse about the locals as savages or mindless brutes, really just reiterating the sheer arrogance of the Empire. We also learn that the Empire has been actively undermining the gathering of the locals for the Eye. The Commandant proudly proclaims that they've actively been setting up distractions as well as an Imperial viewing festival to act as substitutes for the pilgrimage. And this is a cultural invasion as much as a military one. It also just goes to show the ways in which the Empire sets about enforcing their will on the people, which isn't solely restricted to firepower. It's also a callback to what Nemik was talking about in the previous episode about the Imperial thought machine and how the Empire is able to assert its control over the people, controlling their behaviors and way of life. We then hear Tamrin try to establish contact with Vel and Cinta, giving us the group call sign as Echo 1. Now this could be a reference to a multitude of things. It could be a reference to the future rebel base called Echo Base located on Hoth, the very same base featured in The Empire Strikes Back. So perhaps the name Echo Base might be named as such in homage to the rebels' humble beginnings. Another link might be with Evelyn Yob, who was a female human from Naboo who served as a starfighter pilot and had the call sign Echo 1. She was featured in the short story The Starfighter Trap, now considered Legends, and served during the period of time Padme became Queen of Naboo. We then also learned that Tamrin was once a stormtrooper, which really explains why he is so uptight and where his military background comes from. The Imperials escort the pilgrims and the Commandant gets ready for the event.
None of this was stored properly, it's all compressed.
Perhaps you've expanded?
The Empire and the Aldani exchange furs as part of the custom, and the lead Aldani says, letting us know that the resentment towards the Empire is real and that they are far from the mindless brutes the Imperials make them out to be. But what is also interesting is that the lieutenant purposefully mistranslates as to not upset the Commandant and potentially jeopardize the mission, something which the lead Aldani takes note of. The rebels hold the Commandant hostage, and if you notice, Skeen is the one who decides to put the Commandant's family at gunpoint, kinda just foreshadowing his deeper nature towards the end of the episode. But by holding the Commandant's family hostage, it also speaks to the darker nature of the rebellion, the willingness to get their hands dirty to serve a greater purpose, slightly blurring the lines between good and evil. During this commotion, the engineer officer gets shot, essentially guaranteeing that word will reach Coruscant. But if you slow down the footage, the colonel actually manages to get a shot off just as he's shot, barely missing Nemik's face. Couple of scenes later, we learn why Vel is so protective of Cinta in the previous episode, and it's clear that the two of them have a pretty intimate relationship with each other. Which is kind of funny because this makes two different people jealous that Cassian would swoop in and steal their partners. As the rebels descend into the vault, we find a group of Imperials playing a sort of card game. The rebels take control of the area and outside the Eye begins, and it's pretty stunning. The rebels unlock the vault and blow the controls to free the credits. As the rebels load the credits, Alkenzi sends out some TIE fighters to check on the situation. This is also the first time we see stormtroopers in Andor. If you slow down the footage, you can see them standing in the background here, which might hint to us that we will be getting to see them more often as the stakes increase. The rebels are then interrupted by the Corporal, and in an attempt to convince him, Lieutenant Gorn tries to get the Commandant to support him, who then promptly decided that it was a good time to have a heart attack. A gunfight ensues and Lieutenant Gorn goes down. At this point, it's a pretty mad struggle and we see that Tamrin is the next to go down. What's interesting about how Tamrin goes down is that before he rushes out, he tells Skeen to cover him, which he does for a short moment, but then immediately pulls back to cover, which causes Tamrin to be shot. You really can't help but wonder if Skeen did this on purpose. Knowing that it was his intention to steal the credits for himself, he could have just let Tamrin die, which would be one less person to worry about. As the rebels begin to take off, the force of the launch causes Nemik to be crushed by a cart of credits, effectively crushing his spine. Valve gives him a med spike, which is basically an adrenaline shot to keep him going, just so that they can navigate out of the situation. As Cassian flies the ship, we get an intense moment with the TIE fighters chasing them, and there's a cool little detail that demonstrates the difference between Imperial tech and old tech. In a very brief shot, we get the TIE fighter struggling to work his Imperial targeting system due to the interference by the eye. Nemik, on the other hand, who operates with old tech, is completely fine. Another example of the issues with Imperial tech and why sometimes new isn't always the best. As Cassian and the rest try to make it out, we see Cinta leaving the base dressed in an Imperial uniform to cover her escape, and we can't help but wonder what's next for her. The group takes Nemik to see a doctor by the name of Dr. Quadpaw, because he has 4 arms and all. Outside, Skeen attempts to entice Cassian to join him in stealing the credits for themselves, and in this moment, Skeen represents what Cassian could have become. Both are somewhat similar, both lied about their past, and both are trying to find a living for themselves. And Cassian is very opportunistic, but in shooting Skeen at this very moment, it's him rejecting that he would ever stoop so low. It also demonstrates that something has changed within Cassian, whether he would like to admit it or not. That a part of him truly does care about the rebellion, or at least enough not to steal from the cause. We later learn that Nemik doesn't survive, and it really serves to make the stakes of this conflict so very real. Cassian returns the crystal and is given Nemik's manifesto. And what's really sad about the whole situation is that manifestos usually only become important after the author has died. So in this sense, the manifesto will become important to Cassian and his journey into becoming a rebel, but only after Nemik's death. Back on Coruscant, the ISB get wind of the situation, and Mon Mothma delivers a speech about the Gormans again to an empty chamber where no one is listening. So really, the show is cluing us in on the fact that whatever is happening on Gormand will be super important later down the line, something which I've already covered in a different video. In Luthen's shop, we see a customer looking over some pieces, and Clea points out that it's a Devron Blue. Now the Devron Blue is likely a gemstone that came from the planet Deveron, a jungle planet that was home to the Deveronian species, the devil-looking alien that we first saw in A New Hope, and most recently in The Bad Batch. Another customer in Luthen's shop asks about Aldhani, and it almost gives Luthen a heart attack. But he later learns that all is well, and we all breathe a huge sigh of relief. So that was the breakdown for episode 6 of Andor. Honestly, this was a great intense episode, and I cannot wait to see what's next. Anyways, that's all for this video. Be sure to let me know what you think and hit the bell icon for more. As always, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. I am the Lost Acolyte,
and I have spoken.